Hello everybody, this is Drew Douglas and for day 14 of WordPress for Designers on blog.themeforest.net. Today we are moving right along and we are going to finish our front page of our paper business theme that we've been working on. A few of you mentioned in the comment section that you were having a little trouble hearing me on my mic, so I made sure I turned up the volume this time, so hopefully you guys can hear me a little bit more clearly, and let me know, of course, if you have any more issues with the volume or video or anything else, and I'll do my best to fix it. Quick overview of what we'll accomplish today. We are going to skip the slider for one day, as a lot of you would rather have just finish the home page, as you mentioned in the comments section, and that's fine. That's probably just as good of an idea as anything else. So we will finish our static front page today. We will learn all about using custom queries, and just a lot of cool little WordPress tricks like working with custom fields and some excerpts and stuff like that. So let's just pick up where we left off, and you will remember that this is what we left off with. Last time on day 13 we put in our basic reset, we got our logo styled, we handled our navigation, and we got everything kind of ready and in place. So let's go into your text editor of choice. Mine is Coda, and let's get coding here. Go ahead and open up frontpage.php, which is the file that where our main homepage is located. And keep in mind that the logo and the navigation are in the header.php file, so that is in get header, and this standard footer we have going right now is in get footer. So all of our other content, all of this content is obviously going to go in between our get header and get footer call. So what we want to do is create a new file, and we're going to call this featured section.php. And this file is going to be the file that contains our slider and everything that goes along with it. And we're just going to give it a div ID of featured section. And I'm actually going to fill the div with and NBSP semicolon, which is just like an HTML ampersand way of putting just a space in between a div. As I've found, sometimes if you leave divs completely empty, you can get some weird behavior. So I always think it's best just to fill in a div with something, and I usually just use that technique. Okay, now that we have our div ID in our featured section, just kind of a little placeholder, we're going to go back to our front page.php, and we're going to open up some PHP tags and say include template path, all one word, space period, open up some quotes, slash featured section.php. Okay, we'll go ahead and save that. Now there shouldn't be any changes yet. If we go here and refresh, because that div doesn't have anything in it and it doesn't have any styles associated with it yet. Well, even though we're not going to work on our slider, let's go ahead and style it so we can kind of style around it and kind of get a feel for how our final home page is going to look. So open up style.css and scroll down to the very bottom, and we're going to start a new section, and it's going to be called Featured Styles. Okay, and we will just style our featured section ID. We'll go ahead and put a background image in of transparent URL. It's going to be style images featured underscore background.jpg. No repeat, and scroll. The width is 824 pixels. The way I sliced it, and the height was 301 pixels, and we just need some basic, well, just one margin. We're going to have a left margin of about negative 25 pixels so we can align everything the way we want it to. And the way I sliced it just requires me to pull it to the left a little bit. So yours might not require you to do that. Mess around with the margins and see what works for you. Okay, and if we refresh, we can see here's where our slider is going to be, and here's just the background of our slider that we sliced the other day. So yeah, that's all we're going to do with our slider today. I just wanted to put that placeholder in there for now. So what we're going to cover now is the tagline here, the paper plane, the 3 columns, and our footer. So pretty much everything else. Probably the most confusing, or not confusing, but trickiest part of this will be how do we get 3 columns to show, and how do we separate our 3 columns using one text box from the admin area of WordPress. And I'm going to show you that now. So what we're going to do is log into our admin panel and go ahead and go to Pages, Edit, and then click on the home page, which is where all of our information for our front page is. And you'll see I'm already there, and I already have some basic info in here, and I'm going to explain this. Basically, what we need is we need 3 different columns to show up: who we are, what we do, and latest blog. Now, who we are and what we do is going to be kind of defined by us and written by us, meaning the content, the paragraphs right here, are going to be just hard-coded into this text editor by us. However, the latest blog is we're just gonna pull the latest blog entry and just a snippet of it and display it. So the question arises: how do we get 3 different columns to show up in just using this one text box? And the obvious answer is just to use a div class that just floats to the left and then style that. We could do, some people might say, well, you could use WordPress shortcodes. If you don't know what WordPress shortcodes are, if you look up where my cursor is now, a shortcode would look something like this. Front column, you can have your data and blah. Then you'd end your front column. That's what a shortcode would look like, but I don't really see how much different that is than an HTML tag. You're still opening and closing a tag. The only difference is you're just giving it a class. So I think we can handle a div class, and this will be able to solve a lot of our any headaches that might come up from this. So if we see we have a div class of front columns, who we are, which is our first column, and then inside a paragraph tag, just some basic dummy text, and then just a kind of a dummy link that we could link to our about page or whatever page we want to later on. Scroll down again, we close our div and we open up another div class of front columns. Again, what we do, this is our second column, and just some paragraphs with some dummy text again and a link. So what we're going to do is we're going to style these front columns to where they'll all float to the left, and then we'll have them as we need them. So the last thing to kind of think about here is how are we going to get the blog entries to show up, and we will handle that. Shortly. But for now, just know that we have some basic content in our home text box, and we're using a div class of front columns around each individual column. Okay, so let's go into Coda, and now we need to get that information out. So go underneath our include of featured section on frontpage.php, and we're going to start a basic loop here. And we've gone over loops many times now, so hopefully this should look pretty familiar. We're going to say if have posts colon. And we're going to make a simple div ID of front content. Okay, now we're going to say PHP while have posts the post. Okay, so now we're inside of our loop, which is pulling all of our information from our home page. The first thing that we want to display, though, is our tagline. because that comes before our columns do. So how are we going to display our tagline? How are we going to separate it from all this text we have in here? Well, what we're going to do is scroll down, and WordPress has what's known as custom fields, which allows us to describe custom names and custom values for extra information or data or text that we might need. And it's really, really basic. Pretty much I've created a custom field by typing in tagline for the name, and then for the value I've just typed in the tagline, which is "We build websites based on the latest web standards, providing the best possible solution to your company." You'll also notice that the websites and web standards are wrapped in span tags, and that is because you can see they are different colors than the rest of the tagline, and we'll need to style those accordingly later on. So a custom field, it's just nothing more than coming over here, adding your own, name, which is tagline, and then value. And then you save your post along with everything else, and I will show you now how we will pull that out. Okay, so we are still inside of our loop. I'm going to open up an H3 tag with an ID of tagline. This is where we will store our tagline. And now we'll say PHP echo get underscore post underscore meta. And this is the function that's going to allow us to grab any values from our custom fields that we have. Well, the first thing we need to do is tell the function what post we want to grab this from. So we'll use the post variable, and we will point that to ID, post ID. Next, we want to grab, tell it what name we want to grab. We want to grab the tagline, the value of tagline. And last, just pass it true. Okay. Next, if we remember, we have this little nice paper plane that we want to show up kind of to the right and a little bit to the right and underneath of our tagline. So we're going to insert an image here, and we'll just say for the image source, WP content themes paper business style images plain.png, and for the alt we'll just do paper plain for now. And we don't need to give it a custom class or ID, as we can just use CSS to target it within the H3 ID of tagline. So now we have our plain inside of our tagline header. And now we need to pull out our content, which is the columns and the dummy text we set up. And this is one of the easiest parts, which is just PHP the content, like so. Now we will end our while loop. Like so. And now we will say PHP else. And this would be in case maybe there aren't any posts. If we don't have posts, we can just give a nice little, something like, whoops, we could not find what you were looking for. So sad. And don't forget to end our original if statement. Okay, so let's see what that gives us so far. Okay, well now we have our tagline here. We build websites based on, blah blah. We have our paper airplane here, who we are, what we do, which are our first two columns. So everything that we would expect to be here is here. It looks pretty awful right now, but we will style that in just a second. But next we are going to look at how to get our recent blog entry to show up, and how to fit it in with the rest of our columns that we're already going to have. So to do this, right after underneath our end while statement, we are going to use what's known as a WP or WordPress custom WordPress query, which is uses the WP query object. And this is really just using the WP queries is just a really awesome way to have all kinds of multiple loops going on, pulling out all kinds of different things for WordPress. And I think you'll find that this will be one of the most helpful things that you might learn in this series. So that said, open up some PHP tags, and we're going to create a variable called recent blog equals new WP underscore query. Okay, next we're going to do recent blog query. Now we're going to actually execute our query here. So we're going to say show posts, all one word, equal to 1, because we only want to grab 1. And now we're going to start another while loop, because now we have a custom query going here. We're going to say while recent blog have posts recent blog the post. So you'll notice it's very similar to how we would write a regular loop, except now we're just kind of storing our new query object in our recent blog variable. We're running our query, which is just show post of 1, and then we're using our while loop, which we'll be inside of right now, to pull out whatever information we need, which in this case will be our latest blog entry, and we want to make sure we style it just like we have the other columns so it shows up properly. So let's go ahead and end our while loop so we don't forget to do that. Okay, now inside of here, you'll remember that we have div class of front columns, which we are going to float to the left, which will make them all line up like so in order. This means that we need to wrap the recent blog post in the same class. So we're going to say div class equals front columns. And we will close our div tag here. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is pull out the title. So we'll use some h2 tags for this. We'll say PHP the title. And we can just use that as, like we were in any other loop, which we are. We are inside our custom loop. So we can just grab the title of our recent blog post. Next we want to, inside some paragraph tags, we want to grab just kind of an excerpt of the content from the post that we're pulling. So there are a few ways to do this, and we could do it with the excerpt, but there's a few issues that come up with that. And one neat way that I found to do this is with a function that's actually called the content RSS, which is pretty neat. I'll show you how it works. We'll do PHP the underscore content underscore RSS. Okay, first we're going to pass it the parameters, what we want it to say after the snippet, like a read more link is what. So we're going to say read more and helip, which is where they have dot 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 afterwards. Next parameter is just going to be false. I will link to the WP Codex so you can understand what all these parameters are doing. Next we're going to do quotes with just a space in between. And lastly, we want to cut it off after 35 characters, which means we only want 35 characters from the recent blog post that we're pulling. So to kind of recap, that's the content RSS, read more and helip, false, a little bit of a space, and 35. And I will come back and explain all those parameters shortly once we finish this up. But basically what that's doing is pulling out 35 character snippet of our recent blog post. Yep. So next we want to add a little bit of our read more link here. So we're going to open up some span tags for this. Okay. So next we'll open up an anchor tag. Say href. Inside we'll say PHP. Obviously we're going to use the permalink. And our title is going to be PHP the title. And then we'll just say something like read more and helip. And we will close our anchor tag, and our span class is already closed. Okay. So let's see what that gives us and if that worked out okay. Okay, perfect. Sample blog post, and it's pulling out exactly what we wanted, and it's appending a little bit of a read more link onto the bottom of it. So if I go to post edit and I go to sample blog post, you can see it actually is pulling the first little snippet of our sample blog post, just like we told it to. So you know, we kind of have everything we need here for the home page except for the footer, which we'll set up. So let's go ahead and do the footer, and then we will style all of this. So open up footer.php and get rid of everything inside the p tags, like so. Make sure to leave the WP footer hook there. Do not delete that or anything else below that. Okay, for the footer, obviously we're going to give it a div ID of footer, and we'll close our div. Okay, and next inside of that we're going to put an unordered list, because if we look at our Photoshop document, we can see that it actually lists our different pages just like it does at the top right here. So that's what we will do, and we can accomplish this now with PHP. And you might remember the WP list pages function. Okay, now what we're going to do is pass a few parameters here. If we look at the document again, you see how after home and about and how after every page link here there's a little slash, just to kind of separate them. We need to figure out a way to put a slash after every single one of those, which is kind of hard to do since WordPress automatically outputs these as list items. But luckily with 2.7 we can pass it a parameter named link after. So inside WP list pages say link underscore after equals, now make sure you put a physical space here and then slash. Okay, that'll take care of that. Now and then we'll say and title underscore li equals, and then we'll just leave it like that, which will output just a regular set of list items, nothing else special, nothing prefixed to it, which is why we're leaving that equals blank on the title li. So go ahead and save that, and we'll refresh, and there it is in all of its unstyled glory, and we even have the little slashes after each one of them just like we wanted. So I know this looks pretty god-awful right now, but do not worry, we will get to the style shortly. So let's continue on with our footer, and we're going to give it a div class now of align right. And if you will think back to some of our styles, if we go to CSS folder, we go to layout, it comes with a little handy align right class, which most WordPress themes do. They come with kind of a standard set of classes, and align right is one of those, which just floats the content right. It's just a nice way, nice simple way to use a class that's already there for us. And this is going to be, we're aligning things right because we want to get this copyright here, and our our title and all rights reserved to the right of our to the right. So now we'll open up some paragraph tags. I'm going to say copyright 2008. Now one thing I like to do that it wasn't done in the PSD was we want to say 2008 to whatever the current year is now. So we can kind of do 2008 dash PHP echo date inside some quotes and then a lowercase y. And that way we don't have to come back and change it every year. It'll just say 2008 to 2000 to 09. Kind of a handy way of letting PHP do the work for us there. Next we'll open up some strong tags, and inside of that we will put PHP blog info name, and lastly we want our little all rights reserved message, because indeed all rights are reserved. Okay, go ahead and save that, and we'll look at what we got and move on to our styles, which we desperately need at this point. Okay, and there we go. It's showing up at least how we expected, and you can see that nice little PHP date coming through, 2008 to 2009. So when 2010 hits, that'll update itself. So the last thing we have to do today is open up our style.css and style all this stuff that we've just created. And you can just kind of follow along, and I'll try to explain all the styles as I go through. We'll start with our tagline, so we'll start right here with the the We Build Websites Based On, and that's still in our featured styles section. So we'll say h3 with an ID of tagline, and we'll say font size 31 pixels. And I don't expect you guys to know obviously any of these specifics off the top of your head. I just know all this stuff from kind of messing around and measuring a lot of the different theme elements and stuff. So don't think I just am guessing on these font sizes. I'll check it out in Photoshop first and then save it on my notes. So don't feel like you just have to guess at font sizes. Just open up Photoshop and figure out what the font size is. And next we'll do a font weight of normal. Our line height we're going to set to 45 pixels. Our margins we're going to have 50 pixels on the top, 0 pixels on the right, 100 pixels on the bottom, and 0 pixels on the left. And lastly we're going to set it to a position of relative, and that will help when we're trying to line up and position our paper airplane relative to the tagline. So that's some of our tagline styles. Let's save that and see what that gives us. Okay, it's getting there, looking a little bit better. Let's move on. We'll say h3 tagline span, meaning any span classes inside the h3 header with an ID of tagline will have a color of 65 BDFF. And if you use the eyedropper tool, that's the color you will get. So you will see now we got, that's the, why we needed those span classes, because now we can match the Photoshop layout that way, like they have done there. Whoops. Okay. And now we just need to style the paper airplane. We want to get it, shown up right over here, kind of how it is in the PSD. So you'll remember that we set our tagline, our h3 tagline to position to relative, and so now we can do h3 tagline image. So any image that's within our h3 tag of tagline, and now we can do position absolute width is 200 pixels. Whoops. Height is 175 pixels, top negative 18 pixels, and right is negative 95 pixels. And now it will always be absolutely positioned relative to this tagline. So when I refresh, we'll see it's exactly where we want it. And I got it there by just messing around with the top and right values until I got it where I was happy with it. So there is our tagline and our airplane already styled, not too tricky. And we are done with our featured styles section. So now we're just going to create a new section for those front columns that we talked so much about today. I probably overhyped how hard that would be because this is going to be quite simple. Remember, all of all three columns that we have, including our blog post query, is contained within a div class of front columns. So what we're going to do is set a width to the which is 245 pixels. We want to float them to the left. We want the font size to be 13 pixels, and the margins we want 21 pixels on the right. If you worked the math out, which I did, you know, that is what you'd come up with. I actually think you come up with like 21.7 pixels of a margin, but obviously 21 pixels will do just fine. Okay, and that is all the styling we need for front columns. Let's see what that gives us already. Okay, so you can already see that the columns are at least lining up in the order and how we'd like them to, you know, to a degree. Now we just need to work on more of the typography and the styling. So now let's say class front columns H3, or I'm sorry, H2. Font size is slightly smaller than the tagline size, so it's font size of 28 pixels. Margin, we want to give it 10 pixels on the top, none on the right, 20 on the bottom, and none on the left. And we want to give them a font weight of normal. Save that, we'll refresh. Looking even better. You know, if we kind of start comparing it to our Photoshop document, you can see we're getting closer and closer. Next we want to say front columns, P for paragraph tags. And now we just want to change the line height on these because right now it's not, we need much more line height than we have going on right now. So let's say line height of 23 pixels. And lastly we'll say front columns A for anchor tags will be a color of 65 BDFF. Alright, and let's come back, refresh, and it's looking pretty nice. Our columns are, I mean, pretty close to how we'd like them to be. You know, think that the typography and everything, of course you guys can criticize me if not the greatest designer, but I think the typography and the line height and the font sizes look pretty close to to what we got right now. So moving on, the last thing is our footer, and we will be done styling our home page minus the slider, which we will talk about in our next series. So we will start a new section called Footer Styles, and first we will style our footer ID, our div ID of footer. We want to set that background that we have, transparent, URL, style, images. I forgot what it's called. Let's see. Okay, it's called footer_bg.jpg. We do not want it to repeat, and we want it to scroll. It's a width of 819 pixels. It's a height of 126 pixels. Set some margins here, 70 on the top, none on the right, 50 on the bottom, and about -12 on the left to kind of pull it over to the left there to align things. And a color, we want to set a default color for our footer here, which is going to be kind of a lighter gray, kind of a charcoaly gray, which is 9F, 9F, 9F. And lastly, we will set our default font size for anything contained within our footer of 14 pixels. So I don't know if you've noticed, but Jeffrey did a really kind of nice job as I was going through the CSS of just making real minor changes in font size and font weights to kind of draw the user's eye throughout the theme. So take note of that, because I thought that was really well done, just using subtle things like font size and font weight to really have a nice impact on the design. But sorry about that little rant there. Let's continue here with footer, and now let's style our navigation, which is inside an unordered list. Ugh, I cannot talk today. Okay, and we're just going to give that a little bit of padding. So we're going to say 60 pixels on the top, 0 on the right, 0 on the bottom, and kind of 28 pixels on the left. Let's go ahead and save and see what we're looking at so far. It's awful right now because we have a few more things we have to take care of here. Let's move on before we do that again. Okay, let's say footer unit list, or unordered list, I'm sorry. And then our list items, we're going to float them left, display inline, and we're going to give them a margin on the right of about 8 pixels. We'll save that. And before I forget, that just reminded me of something. Let's make sure that we clear our floats this time. So underneath our div class of front columns, where we have our custom query going, just go ahead and give it a BR class of dirty little trick, which will it's just kind of a pre-set up WordPress class that we've discussed before that will allow us to clear any floats. If you don't like adding an extra markup to clear your floats, do it however you like. This is the way I like doing it. I can keep track of it where I'm clearing my floats, and it just works for me. So do not forget to clear your floats, because I think I forgot to do that last time. Okay, so let's go back to our style, and let's continue. Now let's do footer, unordered list, list item with a class of current page item, and then any anchor tags inside that. We want them to have a color of 6C, 6C, 6C. So what is that all about? The list with current page item, and then the anchor tag inside of that. Well, if you look here on our PSD, you'll notice that the home, which is the current page item right now, is slightly darker than the other page links. And WordPress automatically adds a class called current page item to whatever the current page item is here. So obviously that will be home. Few more styles left to take care of. Now we need to take care of our default anchor colors, which would be all the other ones besides the current page item, and that will just be 9F, 9F, 9F. We will style our footer paragraphs, so we'll do footer ID paragraph, and then we will say margin right of 30 pixels. You'll remember that we're floating that to the right with div class of align right, so we need to kind of push it away from the edge there a little bit. And last but not least, we will say footer paragraph strong, so any strong tags within the paragraph within the footer ID will have a color of 6C, 6C, 6C. Because not only is the text strong, it is actually a different color if you look close enough on the paper business here with the eyedropper tool. So let's take a look at what that did. Perfect. You can see all of our styles are showing up exactly like we'd like them to. Our current page item, which is home, is a slightly darker color than the rest. We're getting those little slashes in between each one. If I were to click on About, which obviously is not going to be styled, but I scroll down, you can see that About is now the darker color. So that is what current page item does. And guys, we are pretty much done with our front page, besides the slider, which is kind of a file in itself. But I think we can go ahead and consider most of our front page a success. Yeah, and I think that's where we'll leave off today. So hopefully you guys learned a lot of stuff today. I'll make sure to leave a bunch of links today below for all of you, because I have a lot of things that I think that need to be discussed. And before I forget, we were also floating something in our footer, so let's go ahead and clear that. And we'll say BR class of dirty little trick. And obviously we're probably not going to be putting any information underneath our footer, but it's always a good idea just to clear your floats, just to keep your layout in good check, and so you don't have any unexpected problems. Alrighty, I think I've rambled on long enough today, guys. I will see you for day 15, where we will start on our slider. Have any suggestions, comments, anything, let me know. Happy WordPress coding, guys, and have a wonderful day.